Hey, it's your old pal Lucid Stu again, and we are back with our old friend, the Chicago Hub Network. We've worked through the hub and spoke concept around Chicago in several previous videos. In this one, we'll take a look at a direct connection from Chicago to the capital of Wisconsin, Madison. This video is sponsored by the High Speed Rail Alliance. The High Speed Rail Alliance is a people-powered nonprofit working to bind the nation and build stronger communities with great trains. The High Speed Rail Alliance helps advocates, business leaders, and civic leaders understand what an American rail revolution could be and how to make it happen. If you want American high-speed trains, get on board with the High Speed Rail Alliance. Check out the link to get involved. The High Speed Rail Alliance put this 2 hours to Madison concept on their website using the federal high-speed paradigm of 110 miles per hour. We're going to check that out and see if it can be done. I will also give some options including electrification, a stop at O'Hare International Airport, fully grade separated 125 mile per hour class 7 within the existing right-of-way, and lastly we'll look at a true high-speed option. We'll see about how fast each would be and estimate what they might cost. Let's check out the metros real quick. Chicago, Illinois, with a metro population of 9.6 million, is the third largest in the United States. It is considered the rail hub of the country, and it's certainly the hub of the Chicago Hub Network high-speed rail concept. The Chicago area has an extensive transit network of all types and 3 commercial airports, O'Hare International being the largest by far. Madison, Wisconsin is 120 miles distant to the northwest as the crow flies. It is the capital city of Wisconsin and has a metro population of 700,000. Madison's downtown area is located on an isthmus between 2 lakes, making it unique among larger U.S. cities, although this does somewhat limit access. Madison and its surrounding area is one of steady growth, expanding by about 10% a decade as far back as records have been kept. Madison's airport, Dane County Regional, is small in national terms, but it does facilitate traffic with O'Hare in Chicago that perhaps a significantly fast train could supplant. Transit in the Madison area is provided by Metro Transit and takes the form of bus service. Between our endpoints are several small to medium-sized cities, most of which have quaint downtowns and some room to grow around a new train service. I've picked 2 to stop at with an express: Crystal Lake, Illinois, population 40,000. I like the downtown area for its redevelopment potential. In Wisconsin, we have Janesville, population 65,000. Janesville has the distinction of having placed a parking lot over the river that runs through its downtown. Thankfully, they have removed that, and perhaps that attitude makes them more amenable to developing around a train station. Anyway, let's get to the route. For our direct option, our train will originate in downtown Chicago at the Ogilvie Transportation Center simply because it's the easier option. There have been rumblings about linking Ogilvie and Chicago Union with a subterranean walkway, so perhaps in the future the choice won't matter. As is, above ground, the 2 are only 3 blocks apart. Chicago Union is the busier of the 2, facilitating 40% more boardings, but both are very busy by North American standards, so it's not like Ogilvie is a step down. The route is nearly entirely owned by Union Pacific. There is little freight traffic and almost none north of Harvard, Illinois. Metra currently uses the right-of-way for commuter service out to Harvard. The first 31 miles out of Ogilvie are at least triple-tracked, which would allow through trains to easily pass commuter locals. Though mostly straight, this area does include some obstacles, like not 1, not 2, but 5 at-grade rail crossings, which would likely keep things from consistently opening up until the triple tracking ends at Barrington. As for at-grade road crossings, I count 146 total on this route, 127 of which we would potentially run through at 110 miles per hour. To handle that, we're going to use quad gates, which the Federal Railroad Administration estimates to cost about $500,000 per intersection adjusted for inflation. The other 19 crossings will be slower speed and can continue with their current protection. The first 10 miles out of Ogilvie are grade separated from roads already, so no issue there. Before we get to Crystal Lake, let's talk service options. This service could have as many or few stops as you like. We will even talk about a non-stop later. The High Speed Rail Alliance seems to suggest quite a few more stops than I am. It all depends what you want to serve and how long you want it to take end to end. There are lots of stations on the line already and room for plenty more in Wisconsin where service currently does not exist. Coming into Crystal Lake, we have one more rail crossing, but this one is grade separated. The route has been pretty straight so far, but a little slow getting out of the core of Chicago. From there to Crystal Lake, it is 43 miles. I have that taking 37 minutes on this express. That is a 70 mile per hour average. Compare that to a limited stop metro train that takes a little more than an hour. Let us continue on north toward Wisconsin. One of the reasons I picked Crystal Lake is because Google Maps 3D data fades out north of here, but really anything from Barrington to Harvard could be your stop out here, and end-to-end time would be the same. In terms of track geometry, the section between Crystal Lake and Janesville isn't the fastest. There are significant sections where a train would need to travel at 110 miles per hour or less, but like the Chicago to Crystal Lake section, most of it is good enough for top speed. Also notable, double tracking only continues an additional 20 miles to Harvard. The right-of-way in Wisconsin is nearly entirely single track. That brings us to Janesville, Wisconsin. The rail path is not straight here and downtown is a somewhat difficult proposition, as it sits mostly on a triangle-shaped peninsula that the Rock River moves around. This means a bridge on the south end and a sharp curve on the north end for our train. Between, there is just enough room for platforms and a station if you close one road. There is a messy at-grade crossing of Court Street, but good luck fixing that. It doesn't show up on the satellite, but on Street View, someone has built a 5-story apartment building across the street, so they already have the beginnings of some appropriate adjacent development. Downtown highlights are Milwaukee Street and the Riverfront, which would be 2 and 6 blocks from this site respectively. From Crystal Lake to Janesville, it is 49 miles. I have that taking 36 minutes. That is an 81 mile per hour average and results in 1 hour 15 minutes to Chicago. Can we make it to Madison in less than 45 minutes? Let's find out. Out of our Janesville station to the north, we have a slow 600-foot radius curve, but if you're going to have a curve that tight on a route, right next to a station is the place to do it. The route then moves along the Rock River, staying relatively slow and quirky, including crossing a golf course at grade. Speed picks up for a bit before reaching another slow curve moving into Evansville. This appears to be the northern extent of any freight activity as well as any track maintenance. Most of the freight use between Harvard and Evansville appears to be grain elevators, and the last one is just south of the city. 5 miles of track between Evansville and Brooklyn is in a disused and overgrown state and would need to be completely rebuilt. At Brooklyn, the line continues north toward Madison single track that is surprisingly about 1/3 grade separated already. This portion is more serpentine and less than half would be at full speed. Coming into Madison, we cross Monona Bay and a few gnarly at-grade crossings. Whether or not these could be corrected is debatable. I'm thinking no, but they're also only a half mile from my station site. I wanted to put the station at the Monona Terrace Convention and Community Center complex, but after staring at it for a while, I concluded that isn't possible. The space just isn't wide enough without tearing the whole thing down. Instead, I went for a realignment of US 151 and other infrastructure just northeast of the convention center and 4 blocks from the Capitol. That would create just enough room for a 2-track station. Platforms would be a touch short at 1,200 feet, but this is a better location than nearby alternatives in my opinion. Alright, we've made it to Madison with our 110 mile per hour diesel electric train set. Let's check travel times. From Janesville to Madison, it is 38 miles. I have that taking 37 minutes for an average of 61 miles per hour. That produces an end-to-end total of 130 miles and a time of 1 hour 54 minutes for an average of 68 miles per hour with stops. Under 2 hours accomplished. Now, the High Speed Rail Alliance had way more stops, but they also suggested electrification, so I ran that calculation real quick as well. And I have the acceleration of an electric train set saving 7 minutes over this distance. With a 4 or 5 minute penalty per stop, an additional 3 stops is quite possible under 2 hours. Something like that HSRA map, I think you're probably talking more like 2 hours 15 minutes in service. A 68 mile per hour average with stops is pretty fast for an Amtrak type intercity service, but can it be faster? Let's check a 125 mile per hour Brightline style Class 7 option. The key here is those 127 quad gates will now need to be grade separated because it has to be Class 7 to go faster than 110 miles per hour, and Class 7 corridors should be grade separated from other traffic and sealed so they can't be easily entered. This route has some good straight parts, but we've already discussed how Janesville to Madison isn't the fastest. Anyway, let's get to the numbers. End to end, I have a 125 mile per hour train taking an hour and 42 minutes, averaging 76 miles per hour. That's a savings of 12 minutes. I also have electrification for that, saving an additional 7 minutes for an hour and 35 minutes. Now the big daddy, let's discuss this as a possible true high-speed option, top speed 200 miles per hour. Chicago rights-of-way are quite wide from the olden times, so finding room for 2 separate tracks isn't a big issue. There will be challenges for sure though. The first real problem is that the current right-of-way is not really 200 mile per hour capable in terms of track geometry. There are too many little jogs that knock things down to 110 miles per hour or less too frequently, so we're going to need to correct some curves. The first few miles I will leave slow. We'd be accelerating anyway, so it's not a huge deal. The route is pretty straight out to Woodstock. The few jogs on the way can be remedied in the existing right-of-way. You might need to move a station or rebuild an interchange. The worst actual destruction involves 2 buildings in the Cary area, so we're talking extremely minimal problems to fit 200 miles per hour there. Chicago to Crystal Lake would be 24 minutes in this paradigm, saving 13 minutes over 110 mile per hour diesel electric. There is an S-curve through Woodstock that could be corrected at the cost of 15 structures, possibly twice that. It's not kid gloves, but still not bad in these terms. I looked at a bypass, but a bypass would be even worse, and it would be slower too. Harvard is where we start getting into big changes because we will bypass that. There are 2 110 mile per hour curves in the area, one in the middle of town, so around we go. I also have that costing 15 buildings and crossing quite a few properties. The opposite of Woodstock, trying to go through town would have quite a bit more impact. Our 10-mile Harvard bypass would reconnect with the right-of-way at Sharon, 200 miles per hour the whole way. 14 miles closer to Madison will go greenfield again. You'll recall that Janesville was poor in terms of speed. We're going to bypass it. Before all you Janesville viewers complain, I do have a decent solution. Janesville is part of the Janesville-Beloit Metro, which is a bi-state area home to about 170,000 people total. I'm going to put the station halfway between Janesville and Beloit next to Interstate 90. It's the middle of the area, good road access, and 1,000 acres plus to develop around a station. It's about the best possible regional compromise. That shortens the distance a little, so now it's only 44 miles from Crystal Lake to Janesville-Beloit. I have that taking 20 minutes, pretty fast considering the distance, at 132 miles per hour on average. Out of Janesville-Beloit to the east, we'll thread a 140-foot wide needle just south of Black Hawk Technical College and cross the Red Rock River on a new bridge. Then a 150 mile per hour S-curve to hop into abandoned rail right-of-way. No time lost there thanks to the S-curve being close to the station. I'm treating the abandoned right-of-way as a suggestion, utilizing it about half the time, but sticking pretty close. That would take out a few buildings in Footville where the old right-of-way has been sold. A secondary advantage of this approach is that it avoids the slow curve at Evansville and goes through at full speed. Those are the types of changes that save minutes over very short distances. Overall, the bypass would be a mile shorter, 5 minutes faster, and consumes 6 more miles of new right-of-way compared to an alternative attempting to route through Janesville. At this point, we're 21 miles from our Madison station, and the theme is progressive slowing due to increasing development. 200 miles per hour stops being cheaply attainable at Oregon, Wisconsin, and eventually we enter Madison at 125 miles per hour, which isn't terrible because it's only a few miles from the at-grade intersections in Madison that can't be easily eliminated. The last mile into the station would still be slow, but we've made it all the way once again. Let's see the results. Janesville-Beloit to Madison, 6 miles longer but 14 minutes faster than 110 mile per hour diesel electric at 23 minutes for an average of 114 miles per hour. End to end, that would be an hour and 11 minutes averaging 110 miles per hour. I have a non-stop Super Express at 56 minutes, which would be a 140 mile per hour average and faster than flight time, but we'll come back to that. One more option to explore, connecting to O'Hare International. For this, we'll change to Chicago Union because it makes access easier. Once again, slow out of downtown. There really isn't a way to avoid that without a tunnel, which we'll talk about in a minute. This would follow the Metro North Central service route and stop at the O'Hare transfer station. That's 17 miles. I have 110 and 125 mile per hour capped diesel electric pulling that off in 25 minutes, which would be 9 minutes faster than Metro, really just by virtue of being a non-stop. The route has too many transitions and not enough straights to gain any speed advantage. Additionally, you're looking at an extra 10 to 15 minutes to get from the station to the terminal. High-speed rail I have at 19 minutes for Chicago Union to O'Hare transfer due mainly to acceleration advantages. That would maybe reach 110 miles per hour. Those 6 minutes are going to cost you because that would require viaduct to maintain separation in several places, including the transitions. From there, we'd hook up with the Union Pacific route and continue on to Crystal Lake. I have this option adding 7, 11, and 13 minutes to our various speed limit options. Another option would be to tunnel the entire thing. You're looking at about 16 miles of it straight to the terminal. That would get you there in about 11 minutes. Which, if you're viewing from Chicago right now, probably sounds amazing, but it would also be expensive. Since I have mentioned cost, let's talk turkey. First, we will review my cost estimation algorithm and some sample results to show that those results can be reasonable. For conventional options, I've tapped a couple of additional sources and adjusted for inflation. The direct route, 110 mile per hour diesel electric, to fix the 5-mile gap, to add a track to 63 miles of right-of-way, to get all the crossings to a 110 mile per hour standard, to build necessary yards and acquire necessary equipment, I have a cost of $925 million. As a reminder, that would get you between Chicago and Madison in an hour and 54 minutes with 2 intermediate stops. To electrify that, there are a lot of sources for cost per mile. I'm going with $5 million. That comes to $650 million for the whole route. However, that could easily be more in practice. Unfortunately, Caltrain electrification came in at $14 million a mile. Anyway, for an hour and 47-minute trip, you're looking at about $1.6 billion. Hey, you know what's probably not worth it? The 125 mile per hour options. Those would weigh in at $7.3 and $8 billion, and I have those only saving 12 minutes over their 110 mile per hour counterparts. 90% grade separated would be a lot safer, it just wouldn't be that much faster for the money. That brings us to the high-speed option. Based on $8 billion for the electrified 125 mile per hour option, take a guess now at the high-speed cost and let me know how close you got in the comments. For 200 mile per hour high-speed rail directly from Chicago to Madison with a possible non-stop time of 56 minutes, I have a cost of $14.2 billion. That is $108 million per mile. That puts it on the high side of typical cost internationally, but it's decent for the US considering that half the route is urban and suburban. For the O'Hare option, I have that adding $20 million to the 110 mile per hour diesel electric option, $650 million for the 125 mile per hour option, and $800 million for the high speed option. For a tunnel directly from Chicago Union to the O'Hare terminals, I estimate cost at $12 billion. As part of a Madison route, I have that adding $12.6 billion to the cost, or essentially double. Now that we've covered cost, let's wrap things up by comparing this to existing air travel. I'm showing 22 daily flights between ORD and MSN, mostly on smaller regional jets. At 85% of capacity, that represents about 1,700 trips. That's 4 Amtrak trains or 2 smallish high-speed rail trains. For time comparison, we'll just look at the 110 mile per hour option and the high-speed option. We can see when considering extra airport time, even the 110 mile per hour diesel electric option would be faster than flying metro to metro. That would also be an hour faster between the city cores, considering transit time to the airports for flying. High-speed rail would smoke flying, getting you there before the plane even left the ground. I think it's fair to say you'd eliminate most flights between those 2 airports with rail. High-speed rail would be faster even if you had to transit to O'Hare from downtown Chicago with Metra. The O'Hare option would probably take a sizable bite out of flights at 110 miles per hour, with a Madison to O'Hare time of 1 hour and 36 minutes, plus the 15 minutes to the terminals. I'll put flight capture at 100% for high-speed rail. That's 1,700 trips a day or 620,000 a year. Let's call it 3/4 of all flights for the 110 mile per hour option. That would be 1,275 daily trips, 465,000 a year. That's 70% of what Amtrak Hiawatha's pulled down last year. There is also capture from road travel and induced demand, but those are much more difficult to quantify. However, even a few hundred extra trips a day would give this route as much demand as any Amtrak intercity route in the region. With a high-speed rail option being 2 to 3 times faster than driving, that could tip some scales. Let's also remember the Madison area has grown consistently at 10% or more a decade, and travel demand would grow similarly in turn. But enough of my speculation, what do you think? Would you use a service like this? Which option is your favorite and why? Let me know in the comments. Big thanks to the High Speed Rail Alliance for sponsoring this video. Go check them out and become a member if you want to support high-speed rail activism in the United States. I have plenty more video ideas in the pipeline. There were recently some developments with Texas Central Railway, and that will probably have a negative effect on the Dallas-Fort Worth high-speed transportation project. Next up, I want to make a rare video advocating for what I think is a better option, so keep an eye out for that. But that's all for now. Until next time, I'll see you on that big beautiful freeway!